Ready when you
All right. How's it going? Obviously, I'm this and everybody knows who I am. Talking with Greg right now. Do you want to take a second to kind of introduce yourself, tell everybody your name, your background, and I guess everything going on with you?
My name is Greg Chopoorian. In order of income, I'm a nursing home administrator, martial arts instructor, and occasional actor. Um, my Armenian heritage has led me to be involved in a number of cultural film and stage projects over the years that is also is tangentially and actually directly connected to other Middle Eastern and Near Eastern subregions. And so both in education experience and research, I've been heavily involved in studying and teaching about the region for decades. This is who I
Gotcha.
am.
Okay, I caught most of that real fast. Is it possible that you can get the microphone closer to you?
Sure. How's that? Better?
What's the closest you can get it? Just because it's picking up a lot of static at the moment.
Okay. How's that?
That's beautiful. All right, that
Oh,
works. Um, okay, can you real fast. I'm trying to make sure everybody else can hear it because apparently some people are having trouble hearing. Um, you said you did. Can you talk a little bit for a second about the type of martial arts training you do? Just so I can continue to test
oh,
the
sure.
microphone.
Sure. In my teenage years, I was doing Shotokan karate, which is a very linear Japanese style. Once I got into college, I left martial arts for a time, and you know, and went to grad school, got married, had kids, and when my sons were old enough to start training, I shifted to Kempo, which is a mixed martial art. Really, it has elements of Chinese, Japanese, Filipino martial arts, and it was developed in its current form in Hawaii in the 1940s and made its way across the United States. It's a very widely practiced style now in the United States. And then about 6 or 7 years or so ago, our Kempo grandmaster, Larry Sullivan, commanded all of those of us who are Kempo black belts to cross train in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as well. So that's part of what we do. Um, Boxing, and it helps keep me feeling younger and flexible and arthritis at bay. All of this.
Gotcha. Okay, hold on 1 second. Can you do me a quick favor? Hold on, I just want to mess with the microphone a little bit more. 1 second.
Sure.
Can you tap that microphone for me?
How's that?
Are you tapping the mic or the pop filter? Okay, okay. On Skype, your friend Aber, on Skype, I don't think Skype is using that microphone. I think that's what's going on. Under
Oh,
Skype, go to the microphones drop down and make sure you select that mic because I don't think it's using that one. I think that's what's going on.
ah, okay. So I can put this back down.
Can you try talking once more? Oh, I don't hear you at all now. Uh-oh. Sorry, give me a sec. All right, hello?
Is there any visual?
Oh, there's not right now, but you sound a million times better.
Destiny, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Oh,
Oh,
shoot.
good.
Oh, okay. You
Can
sound a
can
million
you
times
hear?
better now.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
All right, all I need is the camera back, and then we're good to go.
Camera. I guess there is no camera here on this spot. I'm sorry.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so no camera here?
I can hear him over there, but
Oh, wait, can you hear me right now?
oh yeah, I can. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay, okay.
That was a playback or something. Dan's trying to bring a camera over here.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just hearing a delay. That's what I was misled. It's okay. You want to get out of the way, Dana? No, it's not gonna. I guess the camera ID is not working. So. So I guess we're voice only.
All right, if that's fine, we could just continue on like this. It works okay.
Sure, sure.
Um, all right, I guess I guess we'll just jump into it. So I guess for the majority of this conversation, I'm going to be representing viewpoints that are commonly espoused on the right, and then I would just kind of like to hear your response to them, right?
Sure.
I guess my central kind of claim for this argument is that Islam is a fundamentally violent religion that will entice its members to commit violent acts or atrocity, no matter where they are, removed from culture and whatnot, because Islam is fundamentally, I guess, a violent religion. And then I guess we can just kind of move point by point through that. All right.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm sure as you're aware, right? If you've been following politics lately, one of the big kind of things that have been, or one of the big things that's been kind of boiling up over the past, I don't know, I guess ever since 9/11 even, and maybe a little bit before that, has kind of been this Islam versus the rest of the world, or maybe more specifically America versus Islam, or the West versus Islam kind of thing, right? This mentality has been kind of, brewing over the past few years.
Right.
Right.
And honestly, it started to affect me directly when I was doing Armenian cultural presentations as part of my state's heritage commission, where every year there's an annual folk festival, and I was responsible for the Armenian aspect of it. We would show up dressed in our traditional clothing, which, being from that part of the world, is similar to the clothing of our Muslim neighbors. And so we would have interesting responses. It was the post 9/11, people walking up to me saying, "Why do you people hate us?" And I thought, you know what? I'm really done. I'm done wearing traditional clothes at these things. And I thought, if I'm going to be killed, I'd at least kill me for who I am. But I think that many of us and when I say us, just from the American point of view, viewing Islam as all that different than any of the other religions, than any of the other, that it's so different that it can't be dealt with, is just not been a fact of history. History has not unfolded that way. The three monotheistic religions, the main ones, share more in common than different. Although the differences are important, I'm not pretending they're not significant. But we're also judging, making generalizations based on a cherry-picked version of events. If we were to have ourselves cherry-picked in the same way, and people only considered us through the annihilation of Native Americans or the slavery of African Americans, then we look pretty crappy too. So
Okay, so before we get into the cherry picking of certain events, how, in terms of like fundamentally looking at the religions, how would you respond to claims where somebody brings up the fact that Muhammad was a war leader and had a 9-year-old bride and whatnot, as opposed to say Jesus, who's the central figure of Christianity, who is, I guess, a much more peace-loving kind of go-happy dude that doesn't seem as
Right.
prone to violence or I guess child marriage and whatnot.
Right. Well, again, clearly there are differences between Jesus and Muhammad, and there's differences between Jesus and Moses, and there's differences between all of them and Gandhi. But to use those differences as a predictor on how followers of a religion are going to behave, whether they're going to be mass murderers. Given how Jesus was and how we perceive Jesus, how is it that we have not been better than we, in fact, have been to each other and to non-Christians? Christians have spent a good deal of their history killing each other for marginal differences, from anything from the length of a woman's hair to formulas around how to correctly follow the teachings of Christ. We just got to a point, and again I'm saying the royal we, because my people tradition, my people group is from the Middle East, not from Europe. But as the European experience grew and it became considered more and more a European phenomena, how is it that given how gentle and kind we perceive Jesus to be, that is not reflected in European history until essentially it was a post-religious society?
What would you argue in terms of the fact that recently, although I guess so I could grant you that Christians have been violent in the past, but recently it seems like most of the problems are stemming from Islam. How would you respond to the fact that right now in today's age, it seems like Islam is the one with the majority of the countries or the majority of the problems around the world?
Yes, I mean, I clearly there are problems. I'm not. I think a person would be a fool to pretend there's not problems. But remember, it's not the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, and on into the subcontinent where the religion predominates. Has been struggling with the collapse of empires and with subsequent colonialism for the past period in which we're identifying a lot of the violence as coming from. So we're talking about a large people group that has not had a control over its destiny and are trying to figure out who they are and who they're going to be. So they're at it's a large area of the world. It's called the Arc of Instability, where they're just trying, a lot of them trying to figure out who they are.
What could you argue that, or what would you say to people that would argue that a lot of their instability and a lot of their and a lot of the problems that they're facing in the region are just kind of endemic to Islam? That's Islam's problem.
Well, that's not been the history. There have been hundreds of years under various caliphates and sultanates and emirates and so on. Hundreds of years of relative quiet and calm, and so how do they explain the calm and quiet periods? What's their explanation for that? And also the fact that there were in the Islamic world for centuries the existence of religious minorities, albeit as second-class citizens, whereas in Europe there was no such tolerance for anything other than the brand of Christianity that was promulgated by the state. They did not tolerate the existence of non-Christian communities. Barely tolerated the Jews, and we know how that eventually unfolded. Massacre upon massacre, dispersion after dispersion, and then finally Holocaust. So in the Islamic world, until the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, where you had the Armenian genocide, and you had at the same period the Greeks and the Assyrians and others sharing the same fate as the Armenians. Until that point, these communities existed and even thrived in spite of some of the discriminatory practices. They were not wiped out up until that point, until that empire collapsed.
Gotcha. What how do you feel about things like Sharia law, or the widespread support that so many Muslims around the world seem to have for things like Sharia law? Or do you want to talk a little bit about Sharia law in general, your impression of it, and then the idea that so many Muslims around the world seem to be somewhat supportive of it?
Well, again, I think it's identity politics. This is again an area trying to figure out how to interpret their history and their religion in their current state. I think a lot of Muslims see themselves as having been degraded by colonialism, that they have been controlled by foreign interests, and they resent it. They're trying to find what the purest form of their religion is, and unfortunately for some of them, it's the stuff that folks are justifiably concerned about and afraid of. I share that concern. When I see what ISIS does, when I see what Al Qaeda does, you'd have to be nuts not to be concerned about that. But it is a minority in a very large people group that is following this. And So in other words, Sharia also, even the Sharia concept, there's not a monolithic agreement as to what that even means. We had here in the United States certain ideas and attitudes about what the correct form of Christianity should take, with all kinds of unofficial sort of observances about how long a woman's dress should be and not showing too much skin and all that kind of thing. And it changed over time.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I agree. Oh man, I'm trying to think of anything else I should. Okay, chat. Who are you? I mean, but generally most of what you say is are things that I repeat a lot. I guess the biggest issue that I run into generally when talking to people that are very anti-Islamic is that they seem to take the most extreme examples, and then they try to point to the roots of those causes being the fact that they're rooted in Islam. So, for instance, the argument would go something along the lines of ISIS might exist, in other types of religious entities, but the fact is that right now ISIS exists, and it draws itself like from Islam. Like, people will literally say, so if you say like, well, hey, there are other organizations that are Christian that are terrorists or extremists, they'll counter back and they'll go, okay, well, ISIS is literally taking marching orders from Muhammad. Like, you can literally find the ISIS game plan, in the Quran or whatever, It's
not an illegitimate concern. What's wrong about being so afraid of it is that the majority of Muslims simply don't agree with that interpretation. If they did, we would be in a horrific, much more severe life and death struggle. We'd be having these things happening, the bombings and the attacks, much more frequently. It would be a daily experience everywhere, all over the place, and it isn't. I think that it comes down to education. It comes down to socioeconomic status. Just like any other group of people, we will see Christianity followed in very predictable ways, with a certain level of education, with a certain socioeconomic status. When those things are low, when both of those are low, we see more extreme manifestations of it. I think that there is a similar dynamic at work in the Islamic religion. I can't, not being a Muslim, I can't speak for Muslims. Obviously, it's not just an observation over time. My first direct experience with Muslims was actually with a couple of Turkish brothers that I went to high school with. I was fully prepared to dislike them because of the historic and not far back in history experience of my people under Ottoman rule. What my grandparents went through on death marches and in camps, and all that they saw and went through to be the lucky ones to survive. So I was prepared to really dislike these guys. The only problem with that was they were really good guys, and they had nothing to do with that. Sure. And because we were able to early in our, I was playing football with one of them and had most of my classes with the other one, and we just realized that we were gonna we addressed the elephant in the room early on in our friendship, and therefore we had no shadows over being able to be great friends, and we still love and care about each other. So that's what happened to that.
Sure. For the country of Saudi Arabia, how do you kind of explain this country's position, I guess, on the world stage right now? Like, this is a country that is very wealthy, access to a lot of wealth, is a global player in the energy markets, but still has probably some of the most regressive, rights in terms of gender equality, homosexual treatment. How do you kind of, this would be a state that people would point to and go, oh, well, look, here's these people have tons of money, they've got tons of education, they've got access to influence, but they're still very regressive. It must be because they're Islamic. How do you talk about a country like Saudi Arabia?
Oh, Saudi Arabia is a bizarre situation. They have money, but no accountability. It's a kingdom, so therefore the royal family is only accountable to a small sect called the Wahhabis, who control the interpretation of Islam in Saudi Arabia. It is a very archaic view of what it can and should be. It's bypassed some of the more progressive movements in Islam over the centuries. The parts of the Islamic world, for example, that were exposed to Greco-Roman philosophy and so on, that all bypassed the Wahhabis, and so they are a very extreme and non-collaborative, cooperative, compassionate version of that religion. They are the least compassionate branch, if you will, of the Sunni branch of Islam, probably. They're responsible for inspiring a lot of the hate that leads to the acts that we are all justifiably worried and concerned about. A lot of it can be traced back to the very bizarre relationship between the Saudi royal family, who themselves, by the way, ditch the robes and keffiyehs and go on the superhighway to party in Kuwait, party their asses off, and then go back home and pay homage to these jerks. And it's how they've stayed in power. It's how they keep their family on the throne and continue to live one lifestyle in private and promulgate hatred and extremism in other parts of the world. And their targets are, again, disaffected people who are struggling with their identity, struggling economically. They've especially targeted the Muslim areas of the former Soviet Union and been very successful recruiting there. And these people don't have a living memory of the glory days of their religion in Central Asia and in the Caucasus and so on. They don't have a living memory of that. They just have an interpretation of what that must have been, and it's a problem.
Do you think there's ever like a way forward for Saudi Arabia to become more kind of progressive in its values, or what do you think would be required for that to happen?
Well, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And people who already have absolute power are not interested in ceding any of it. I think the only thing that's going to change them is a bigger force that's going to just decide to take it out from under them, just like they themselves took their name and planted it on a country. How many people do you know that have the nerve to take their family name and stick it on a country, which is what they did to Arabia. They took the Al Saud name and stuck it on the country. They took it away from the previous family, the Hashemite dynasty that ruled in parts of the Arabian Peninsula. At the ending of World War I, that family was chased out of the country. The Saud family rose to power, and they are not interested in becoming less than they've become. So it's going to be some greater force eventually that will dislodge them, or their own people tired of the the disconnect. Unfortunately, whatever overthrows them may be of the Wahhabi variety, tired of their hypocrisy and so on. So they may have a bloody overthrow someday that will, in the short term, not make the place better, but even worse than it is.
And you're saying that's because you don't believe that the family there right now is actually as loyal to Islam as they purport to be, but they could be overthrown by someone.
They're in their actual lifestyle. Mm-hmm. They're famous for being in all the discotheques in Europe and clubs and so on and so forth. They live a lavish lifestyle, and pay. There's one, and this is why Bin Laden, I believe, who was the son of a wealthy Saudi businessman, was disgusted with the hypocrisy that he saw there. Part of his inspiration was the degeneracy in his eyes of the Saudi royal family. So that's a view that's fairly widely held amongst the puritanical types. So they're puritanical in appearance, but in their actual lifestyle, they're not.
Gotcha. How do you feel about apostasy? It seems like the Islamic world has some pretty strong feelings, at least in terms of research polls and whatnot, about killing people that leave the faith.
Right. Well, again, it's interesting. I think it's worth comparing and contrasting that also with the attitude of some of our own fundamentalists in the United States. If you don't have the right formula for being saved, then you're going to hell. And, in a sense, that's the Islamic version. Although we don't kill people here, although I know some people I'm fairly sure would love to have the power to do that. If they only could. I think that would really turn them on if they could have that kind of power. I think that, again, there's no compulsion officially in religion, in Islam. There's no compulsion in religion. But once you are a Muslim, they have not found a way or a formula to allow a person to leave the faith. Although some notable people, in history, have and this is an issue now in Iran as well, and in every Muslim country, there is a minority of people that turn either leave religion or turn to another religion, and they are at high risk. It's a real problem. They have not had, the Islamic world has not yet had what Europe had. They did not have a Renaissance yet or an Enlightenment yet, and so much is interpretation. In any religion, interpretation is part of the deal, and who is interpreting it will lead to how it's practiced and perceived, widely practiced, widely perceived.
Do you think that Islam is fundamentally incompatible with democracy, or can you name or think of any? Have there been any, Islamic countries that have been democratic countries?
Well, we have at least in Turkey is a good example. It's a Muslim majority country, and as long as you are a Sunni Muslim Turk, you're going to have relatively more political freedom than in most other Muslim countries. Although their present leader Erdogan has done a lot to turn it towards dictatorship, but many people point to Turkey as a successful example of that. Although it is in many cases there's a veneer of it, and still a lot of problems, especially again if you are not ethnically Turkish, if you're Kurdish or Armenian or any of the other minorities there, it's not so fun.
Gotcha. How about the? Are you familiar with who the Muslim Brotherhood is?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about them?
Well, they are a politically active group that have some moderation in their views. Not moderate enough for most educated people, but they're somewhat moderate compared to Al Qaeda or ISIS. Certainly, the problem is when they've gained control in a country like they almost did in Egypt. They almost had Egypt in the bag, and they began to go down a road that looked like more extreme than the Egyptian military was willing to put up with. They did not want to have an Ayatollah type of situation as happened in Iran. So they put an end to that experiment. And but unfortunately, that was a democracy, a democratic outcome that was just not acceptable to certain elements of Egyptian society. They did not want to have any part of a reimagined caliphate or a reimagined theocracy. They just didn't want it.
So is the Muslim? I'm sorry, somebody brought this up in chat, so I thought I would ask because they were curious. So was the Muslim Brotherhood? Was this like just like a political party or some type of group?
It's I think it's a large movement, but okay. it expressed itself in Egypt by becoming a political party, and they followed the rules for a while. But there were also parameters, and the Egyptian military, much like in Turkey, the military is considered a guardian of stability in these countries. If they go too far in either direction, if they become too casually global or Western, or if they become too religious, the military is the kind of turns it the way that. Is perceived best for the country. So it's in each of these experiments. Iran had a similar outcome. They had a democratic trend going on, but of course the United States, because that democratic trend was leading to them nationalizing their oil, the CIA put an end to that, and we ended up with the Shah, who tortured people, antagonized his own people to the point where they wished to have an Islamic solution, and here we are. With the Shia theocracy in Iran. So we are, in other words, we've had some of those who are criticizing Islam have no analysis about the activities of their own governments in deliberately at times destabilizing the region so that the oil is flowing in the right direction, so that the Russians aren't in charge, so that no other players kind of have any hegemony there, and the United States has worked very hard to make sure that they are the supreme hegemon there via Turkey, via Israel, and Saudi Arabia. That kind of has and good relations with Egypt has kind of sewed it up for the United States compared to any of the other players. But it's been at the expense of democracy. People resent it. When they do get a chance to express their democratic feelings, it's often in reaction to a hand that we've played. So you can't lay that at the feet just of Islam. There's a context that all of this is happening in. And we have to have some critical analysis of our role in it, just because that's part of the truth. It's part of the truth of what's going on.
Gotcha. How do you feel, I'm just curious, what do you think is the correct action for the United States right now in regards to the Syrian civil war? We'll back up a few days before Trump did the bombing of the Syrian airfield, where there were chemical weapons attacks that were reportedly done by the Syrian government, by Assad's forces. What do you think is the correct form of action for the United States in this position? I'm curious.
That's a really good question. I think that all I can say is that it's a very vicious civil war that very early on became infused with foreign intrigue, so that it's no longer merely Assad versus the rebels. It's Assad versus the rebels and those that are backing him. It's Assad who is backed by Russia versus those other interests. And so we've lost the organic roots of the Syrian problem. And ultimately, those roots go back to a strong man who was Assad's father, ruling Syria with an iron fist, coming from a religious minority, the Alawite sect. They're broadly considered to be Shia rather than Sunni, whereas the majority of the Syrian population is Sunni Muslim. Mm-hmm. Other important minorities. You have the various Syrian Christian groups, some called Aramaics or Syriacs or Assyrians. Then you have Armenians. You have Yazidis, Kurds, and these all are complicated identities that, without some kind of strong hand to keep things steady, you very much in the way Saddam Hussein was in charge of Iraq. for the minorities, Assad represents predictability. So therefore, you have for the Alawites, the Christians, the Yazidis, a preference for Assad because it's the devil you know. Whereas with the revolution, the rebels have their ranks have been infiltrated by Chechens from the Caucasus, Turks, Turkmen, and various other people who may or may not have any organic connection to Syria, but they're very involved in the revolution, and they want that revolution to represent a particular version of Islamic perfection. And so, therefore, it's hard to find the authentic voice of the revolution, even though it's there, and the people who are rebelling against Assad, I totally get it. He's a monster. I totally get why they would not want him. But also I get why those who have stuck with Assad don't want the unpredictability of someone just saying, we'll take care of you, wink, wink, and then have the same stuff that happens, the bloodletting and so on that would happen if someone with a more incendiary vision ends up being swept into power, and you have, again, a theocracy in Syria, which most of the Syrian people really don't want. They really do not,
sure.
Muslim or otherwise. So to answer your question, to say what should the United States do, we have to be more honest about what we've done up to this point. We have funded some rebel groups that have taken the resources and training given to them and probably ended up creating ISIS from it. And I know that's a very incendiary thing to say, but the fact is the money had to come from somewhere for those people to have such a well-trained fighting force. That didn't come out of that didn't come out of the Stone Age. That came from a serious investment of funds and training. And where does that come from? Who provided that? If it wasn't the United States, then who did that? Was it the Saudis? Was it Turkey? How much did we know, and how much did we approve of that? Then once they began to do the things that they do, and ordinary people like you and I see what the game players would consider the collateral damage from it. I think that they kind of gave them pause, and once again we're fighting Frankenstein's monster, which we helped create. So what are we supposed to do now? I have no idea. It's so appalling and it's so evil that I don't even know how to begin unraveling the threads of it. And in spite of how partisan things have gotten in this country, whether it's Trump, if it had been Hillary, or if it was still Obama, we have serious problem with our foreign policy in the Middle East. It helps perpetuate some of the very things that we don't want to happen. The interests of oil companies are not always and totally and completely compatible with who we imagine ourselves to be as a democracy and as a promulgator of human rights. It just isn't. Our foreign policy is oil wells, and our foreign policy is winning at that game. And human rights is sounds nice and so on, but it really isn't how things play out in reality.
Gotcha. How do you feel about Muslim immigration to the rest of the world? Do you think that it has a severely detrimental impact on Europe? Do you think these people are capable of integrating with the greater European society, or are they going to bring their kind of extremist religious beliefs with them and kind of, I don't want to say like infect the population, but kind of spread Sharia courts? No, I get it. Those are good.
By the way, those are perfectly legitimate concerns for people to have. Any country has a right to consider who they're letting in. It's not inherently racist or bigoted to consider who you're letting in your country. I just think that comparing without any basis in stats and facts in history, to compare our situation in the United States with our own Muslim American population, with the problems that Europe is having, is flawed. Europe made some mistakes. Europe was not as careful as I believe the United States has been and who they let into their country, and in allowing kind of this these enclaves to build up in their countries to the point where now it is a problem. They just were not they were not wise in who they let in. And I think that for people that talk about extreme vetting, it's like, my God, how more extreme could our vetting be? We are very careful, very, very careful. It's not easy to get into the United States. It's not. It isn't easy to get in. It simply isn't. We will. I think we've had some failed experiments too. For example, in Minnesota, the Somali immigration experiment has had a lot of failures. They didn't think it through, planting these people in the middle of the country without anyone else to relate to. Didn't turn out too well. It's ended up with a lot of dissonance in that community. They feel isolated. It's led to despair. They've turned to more extreme, the extreme versions of Islam and so on. This is not the experience, however, in New York, in Detroit, in LA, where you have a really diverse Muslim population. Here in New England, where I live, I deal with Muslims all the time. They're just a fact of life, and no, I'm not worried about them. They're well integrated. The kids play baseball. They come to my dojo and train in martial arts. They're involved in things. And
did you say you're providing training to extremist Islamic factions? I mean, no, I'm just
yeah. No, actually, in all of my in my life up to this point, and I'm in my mid-50s. I've only ever once come across a situation, a business where I felt my radar was going off about this little clique of people, and so I reported it to the FBI, which that's what they're there for. But that's once in all of this, with all we've been through, with 9/11, with the wars, with the controversies and so on, and given my family history, which has been real and horrific. By the way, even on that, even as awful as my family's experience was in the Armenian genocide, if it were not for the kindness of some of the Bedouin tribesmen in northern Syria and in Iraq, that took in Armenians when they were going through their Holocaust, there wouldn't be any of us. I wouldn't be having this conversation. People are complicated. Populations are complicated. Identity is complicated. But promoting fear and promoting the worst version of a group as being typical and likely is really unhelpful. We need everybody in the United States, when it comes to terrorism, we have to be on the same page, and to treat Muslim Americans as suspect is a terrible, terrible way. They're a vital ingredient and are being successful, because this is actually the war against extremists is not something we can afford to lose. And so how we play it becomes important. Being fearful. Unnecessarily fearful, not stupid or naive, but unnecessarily fearful and hostile is unhelpful, counterproductive, and not grounded in reality.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Do you think? Are you familiar with like the idea of like the no-go zones and whatnot in Europe? Have you heard about these or heard about the
Sure.
news? Do you
Sure.
do you have any first-hand experience, or do you know like the extent of these actually exist? Are they overblown by the media, or?
No, I think Europe's got real problems, and they're going to have a hard time solving them in a humane way. I think that it has led to a rebirth of latent nationalism, extreme nationalism in Europe, and so it's leading to a certain ugliness in Germany and France and in Britain, because people are sick of that. And I don't blame people for being upset that there would be a spot in their country that they would have to feel uncomfortable. France is France, but then if you get to the point where France is for the French, then we start to have think of bad days. We are not anywhere close to that in the United States. We do not have things like that. We are if I've heard in some of your shows in the past, people raising this idea that somehow Sharia could root in some place and through population and so on and so forth. We have separation of church and state here. Any kinds of laws that are unconstitutional will be struck down. There's no way that can be effected or carried out. It's just not going to happen. We need to stop worrying about that. What we do need to do, though, is continue to be careful who we let in. We have to learn from our mistakes, as in the Somali experiment in Minnesota. That didn't turn out so well. But we have had lots of...
What was that? Can you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, again, Somalia is in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
It's a majority.
Not
Yeah, and refugees coming from there. Someone had the great idea to stick them in Minnesota, away from any other Muslim communities, and just plop them in the middle of the country. And they have not thrived economically. They have not integrated well socially. They are very isolated, and some of the younger members of that community became radicalized. And they're in other words, the stereotype of what people are afraid of has actually happened in the case of the Somalis in Minnesota. However, and also the level of education of these people, the nature of their culture. The Somalis are not Syrians. They're not Iraqis. They're not Iranians. They are a different people group who happen to be the majority of them are Muslim. How they interpret that religion in their country is very different than the average person in Istanbul, for example. It couldn't be more different. And this is what people need to understand. And as with every people group, the role of religion, how it's actually observed, and I've heard you've said it better than I could. People often nominally follow what we allegedly believe, and in the context of our country, where people are free to vote with their feet and choose and so on. Most Muslims are very well integrated into what's going on around them. They're well integrated into their communities. They play sports. They study medicine. They do everything everybody else does, and very warm, decent people by and large. By the way, my experience, which has been pretty extensive. Whether in the medical part of things I work in or the martial arts instruction that I do, pretty warm, decent people as per my experience. I'd be lying and dishonest if I said anything else.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, obviously. Do you have a lot of these conversations with people? Do you find, or?
Well, yes, especially when I was in the past, when involved with Armenian cultural exhibits and festivals and so on, where as part of presenting our traditional culture, which has overlap and commonality with other regional cultures, albeit we are Christians, but we are still from the wider Near East, Middle East region, and so therefore more in common than not. And so it's interesting to have this, when I'm wearing, our traditional dress, say from the Van region, where the traditional clothing is turbans and baggy trousers and geometric pattern stuff. It's cool, but people instantly assume I'm something that I'm not.
Sure.
And I've had very, very interesting conversations with people, thankfully curious instead of being wanting to shoot me. But having some of the most interesting conversations I've ever had, and also having interesting conversations with Muslims too, who mistook me for something else. So mistaken identity has been a fun diversion over the years when doing those cultural heritage festivals.
In regards to the Armenian genocide, does it bother you, I guess, like the stance that when I look at like Obama, are you familiar with like Obama's
Sure.
kind of comments? So I'm aware that before Obama was elected president, he was very much like would publicly state that,
Sure.
there was an Armenian genocide. It was a genocide. This occurred. And then post being elected, I
Right.
don't remember what the word was. He used another word, but he wouldn't actually say genocide anymore.
He said the Armenian word for it, Medzieran
Yeah.
in Armenian. Medzieran means the great catastrophe, which is the Armenian name for it.
Hmm.
It's a matter of history. The very word genocide was created out of the Armenian experience. The person who coined it, Raphael Lemkin, was a Polish Jewish jurist who studied the destruction of the Armenians, coined the word to describe it, and then was fearful that this could be. He was fearful it was a portent for his own Jewish people, and he was right. He was absolutely correct. They were successful with the Armenians, and many of the German military personnel who worked in the Ottoman Empire at the time and assisted with the destruction of the Armenians actually participated in 2 Holocausts in their lifetime. They participated in the destruction of the Armenians, and then later in Germany were actually took part in the annihilation of the European Jews. So it's chilling. It's awful. It's a fact of academe. It's a fact of history. So whether or not it's not going to change history. It has to do with the dance that the American administrations do to try to not lose their assets in Turkey and to try to appear that they care about human rights at the same time. So it's a sham. It's outrageous. It's offensive. What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Oh man, I don't normally do these. Normally, the person I have on, I disagree with everything they say, so the conversation is pretty natural. I'm just not sure what to ask. Um,
That's
I hate. I guess like my biggest two problems that you kind of talked around. My biggest two problems I have when I talk to people about these are one, the interpretation of religious text is something that bothers me a lot. People are very quick when they talk about Muslim people to say, like, well, the Quran says this, or the Quran says that, or the Quran says that. Whereas if I point to the United States, which is, I believe, one of the most Christian nations in the Western world still, like
Yep.
openly Christian, you'd be hard pressed to find, I don't know, man. I would say like honestly, like reading even the entire New Testament, I would say less than 5% of Christians, unless there are more fundamentalist sects that I'm not aware of in the United States. Like it's very rare that people do this, hardcore, cover to cover reading of any holy text and then
Right. Right.
live verbatim to everything. Like religion seems to be such a personalized experience to every person, even in my own city, even in my own, I'm not religious anymore, but when I was Catholic, 2 Catholic churches in the same city where I live
Right.
could give you different interpretations of, like,
Sure.
should homosexual people be allowed in our congregation or not? Like, these are questions that are like
Sure.
so
Very
unique.
topical and very relevant right now. Absolutely. And I think that, and actually, I've read through the Bible. Oy, I want to say honestly, completely read through the Bible 4 times in my life,
Hmm.
and read it. I read it in both Armenian and in English. I like I like the different nuance you get from looking at at the different languages, and you can read through the Bible every day, and just do it continuously and still not get it, and still not understand context, still not understand history, still not understand culture. You can be cocksure about what you think you know, and actually end up comprehending very little, which is why you have people in some parts of Appalachia handling poisonous snakes during their service. It's not. You have all kinds of possible interpretations of a text, as you've mentioned, and yet we want. When I say we in the larger Christian world, we want understanding of the nuance of our holy text, and yet we're utterly unwilling to we're utterly unwilling to extend that to another religion.
Yeah, and
No.
that's a huge thing that I find where I'll talk to people and and not to bash any particular religious group, but you know, George W. Bush literally has said verbatim, you know, like, I prayed to God before we went into the Middle East to make a decision and whatnot. And
Right.
people in the West are very quick to say, okay, well, that's not a holy war. Like, you know, he's very much just speaking about his personal religion. But I guarantee you, and I would bet, you know, every cent I own on it, that if you had a
Right.
Muslim saying the same thing, like, I prayed to Allah before I made this decision, that would
Sure.
100% be, oh, fundamentalist Islam. He's making all of his decisions based on the
Sure.
Quran. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or even
And of
people that will
course,
argue with me that, like, oh, well, the KKK, they weren't religious at all because, you know, the No True Scotsman, you know, those guys weren't actually Christians, but ISIS, those guys are real Muslims, you know, and it's like, geez.
well, we feel also. I think and I think that honestly, you have to. The other elephant in the room is that there are a lot of people in this country that feel convinced that they're being persecuted merely because they have to share the country with people with whom they don't agree on everything. That in itself represents a sinister attempt to subvert their identity and their faith and so on. And it's sad. It's sad and it's comical sometimes. It's frustrating at other times. But we have so much religious freedom. We don't know what to do with it. And unfortunately, it plays out in nasty culture wars instead of there's not a law in this country that's going to keep Christians from investing in kindness and decency to other people and putting their dollars in back of it. You know, there's nothing to keep people from doing any dozens of good things that they could learn from the Bible and apply to other people, you know, as acts of kindness and decency.
Mm-hmm.
But no, we're going to have these bitter, divisive culture wars. We're going to have wars over what people get to do with their bodies. We're going to have wars over who people go to bed with or who people spend their life with. I think, though, that when you talk about separation of church and state, I've always and still believe that is the best possible protection for the Christian religion that you could possibly hope for, so that we don't get grandstanding morons corrupting the intent and purpose of the Christian religion. The country was founded by a mix of people who were some of them were Christians, some of them were deists, some of them were atheists in everything but name, you know, and everything but name only. They wisely, very, very wisely, both upheld simultaneously the freedom of people to follow their religious convictions, but kept it out of government. They had horrific precedent that they had just were fresh from when they founded this country, fresh from all of that. And even in the colonial days of this country, the Salem witch trials, that, you know, we had all of these precedents to inform that very wise decision to keep this very specific religious teachings out of government. And I'm a huge supporter of that. I think it makes us a great country. I think it makes religious freedom actually matter because the government's not telling you what to believe. But I think that a lot of many Christians, they really, really are power identified. They want a pat on the head from government to say, you know what, you're really right, and what you believe is good, and you know, we're going to give you a medal for it or something. They want some kind of celebration of that. But part of the separation of church and state is you celebrate yourself, or you know, you can cite your own faith heroes and give them medals. But it's not going to come from the hands of the government. When it gets down to it, when I talk to people who disagree with me and they want religion in public schools, I ask them, who exactly? Tell me, in your community, who do you want teaching your kid about Jesus in the public schools? And then they're silent. And I'm saying, what if it's somebody who teaches about Jesus in a way that you slightly disagree with? Do you still want it to happen? And they said, well, no. And I said, well, then knock it off. You know, you're free to go to a religious school. You're free to attend a Christian academy. And actually, I do believe, I'm a strong advocate for teaching about religion in schools as a comparative religions class,
Mm-hmm.
so that ignorance of religion is not a virtue either. It doesn't help us understand very important ideas and how they shape the world and history. So I think we should have that. I was fortunate enough to have it. I went to a private school, fortunate enough to have comparative religion. So I learned early in my life about the various forms of Christianity: Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. It did not threaten me in any way, shape, or form with the faith I was raised in and still identify with. It was not a threat at all. I think people are afraid unduly afraid that their beliefs and so on are under attack. I think it's a sham. Really, it is.
Sure. The second problem that I had was that something that you also kind of spoke about earlier, the lack of honesty in terms of talking about the Middle East. It seems like everything over there is so complicated in terms of our meddling in affairs there, the rest of the world's meddling in affairs, and everything that's actually going on there. It's very frustrating to talk to somebody, especially these people that have such large followings that want to boil it all down to like Islam versus the rest of the world. When there's so much going on in those regions, it's very frustrating, and it feels like even the governments don't have an honest conversation. And everything that we're talking about, and even, God bless or whatever, the Syrian people that died in the chemical weapons attacks. But I mean, there are these kinds of atrocities happen, south of the equator all the time. But it seems like we don't really care much, except in this particular country that's also very, a large interest of Russia as well. And it always seems like the conversations that the government and even the media has with its people are never really honest, in terms of what's actually going on.
No, they're not, and I'm particularly as an Armenian Christian, if you will. It's remarkable how people will evoke my particular people group's historic experience as a means of saying, see how horrible all these people are, and yet they don't do it. And it's a very hypocritical way that it's done. They don't call members of Congress, for example, and insist that they, in American affairs and relations with Turkey or with any, they don't insist that Armenian safety, or in Egypt that the safety of the Copts or the safety of Syrian Christians be part of our foreign national security construct. They don't care that much about it. They just care to use it as a soundbite to reinforce a very negative view of the entire region. And so we're fodder for a polemic, and I find really offensive. If you care that much, then be. I'm sorry.
Do the homework. Yeah.
Exactly. Do the homework and find out how, for example, our foreign policy makes the entire region less safe for Christians. For example, if it bothers you that much, then speak up. Say something about it. If you want our foreign policy to have a humanitarian cultural dimension, then there's a lot that we have to look at and change because there isn't any of that. And the Middle East may well be empty of indigenous Christians within another generation if some of the colonial, the adventurism and the militarism don't stop. Because what happens is, much as people in the West are worried about certain historic movements within Islam that have happened over history, in the Middle East they're worried about crusaders. They see the West as, it's the repeat of the Crusades every time, over and over. They see us trying to. They're suspicious of our motives and intentions, and probably rightly so. And then they turn to their Christian neighbors and see them as a potential fifth column, even though the indigenous Christians of the Middle East the Christianity didn't come from Europe. In other words, we're not the result of a colonial experiment in the region. We are the original. We are the original indigenous ones. We're the people who were following this thing back when it was a phenomena in Western Asia. It didn't take root. It took root in Europe several hundred years later, and then grew, and now people associate it as a Western religion. But in origin, Christianity is a Middle Eastern phenomenon.
Gotcha. I think I'm gonna have to take off pretty soon because I'm in the middle of a family vacation right now.
Sure thing. It's
Were
a
there any?
pleasure to have a chance to chat with you. I'm a fan of your adventures. I love your very jujitsu way of dealing with insanity. I think it's great, and we'll continue to look forward to being a fan.
Sure, I appreciate the conversation. This is a little bit more general. Maybe in the future we can maybe dig in more specifically to different things
Sure.
relating to the region. Do you feel like you have good background knowledge of like the specific things going on in the Syria conflict, like the different kind of groups involved and whatnot, ISIS, the Al Nusra Front, and
Yes, I mean I do have good general knowledge. What I don't have is the ability to say, if only these people were in charge, that Syria would be better.
sure,
Because
sure,
I look at all of them, and not one of them has the mantle of legitimacy enough that they represent the country. And that's the problem with Syria in a nutshell. It's why I don't see how it's going to be solved.
hmm
No clear voice, and that none of them have been statesmanlike enough to reassure the people who are afraid of what would happen if their lives are on the line. When the new group comes in. Happy to talk in the future about it, though. For
sure.
sure.
As a final controversial question, who do you think was behind the chemical weapon attacks in Syria?
Oh, that's a good question. It really, it's a really good question. My own, I intuit. Personally intuit that it probably was the Assad regime,
hmm
but I could be wrong. People have been wrong about those things before. Now he may have used chemical weapons in the past,
hmm
and we know that we know that they've had them in the past, but he may not have done this one. That's the problem
Sure.
with jumping to conclusions. We really I don't know. People above our pay grade know these things, but. We have a mess of a foreign policy. So we're talking when people want to focus on the correct response to that one attack. My response is, what are we doing there to begin with, and will we ever get it right? Because I don't see us winning right now the hearts and minds. I don't see us successfully bombing ideas. We have to look at really, really hard at what our so-called allies are doing to contribute to the creation of the very people that we're fighting, and how to stop that.
For sure. Um, okay, yeah, cool. Well, hey, I look forward to talking to you again in the future. It'll probably be in response to another conversation I had with somebody else, so maybe we can dig
Sure
into something
thing.
more specifically. Yeah, but I mean, I really appreciate the conversation. I'm thrilled I got the
Same
chance
here.
to talk to you. Yeah,
Thanks for
thanks, man.
having me. Appreciate
Yeah,
it, Destiny. Have a great day.
have a good one.
Bye bye.
All right, I love you guys very much. I'll probably be streaming sometime tomorrow night, or maybe the day after, depending on when I get back. I'm not sure. Um, yeah, it's harder to have conversations with people where I kind of agree with everything because it feels like a big circle jerk. Um, for the most part, I feel like he said everything that I've agreed with in the past. I don't know what else to say. Um, but anyway, yeah, I will see you guys later. Have fun. Peace out. Stay safe. Be real.